All right. So, those of you gearing up for like, those big exams, right? UPSC, SSC, bank exams, all those.
Oh, yeah,
Well, this deep dive is for you.
definitely.
Buckle up because we're going to really dissect this whole idea of one nation, one election.
Yeah.
Um, and, think about it, right? We could have a single election day for everything,
Yeah.
parliament, state assemblies, even municipalities.
Pretty wild when you think about it.
Right. It could be a total game changer.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating is this isn't some brand new idea.
Right.
India actually held simultaneous elections for a good while, from 1951 to 1967.
Oh, wow.
It was the norm back then.
So take us back then, like to those early years,
Yeah.
right after independence. How did it actually work? And what happened? Like what caused this whole system to, kind of fall apart?
Well, it was pretty straightforward at the beginning. Lok Sabha and state assembly elections all happened at the same time. But then around the late 60s, things started to get a little messy. You had some state assemblies that were dissolved early.
Oh, okay.
And then the fourth Lok Sabha was also dissolved early in 1970.
Right.
And then on top of that, you had the emergency in 1977, which extended the fifth Lok Sabha's term. I mean, it just became really difficult to keep everything synced up.
So like imagine you're studying for your exams,
Yeah.
right? And suddenly you get a question about, say, the sixth Lok Sabha,
Oh, yeah.
and you need to know that it didn't even last a full term.
Right.
Same with the seventh and the ninth.
Yeah.
So this is all really important for understanding, why India shifted away from simultaneous elections.
Absolutely.
But then why bring it back now? Like, why is this even a discussion again?
Well, that's where this high-level committee comes in.
Okay.
It was formed in 2023,
Right.
specifically to explore this whole one nation, one election idea.
Mm-hmm.
And they put together a very detailed report.
Okay.
And get this, the cabinet actually accepted its recommendations in September 2024, which I think shows that they're pretty serious about potentially making this happen.
Okay, so things are getting serious now.
Yeah.
This isn't just some, theoretical discussion anymore.
Yeah.
This is something that could actually happen.
Right.
So tell me, what did this committee actually find? Like, what kind of insights did they get from their research?
Well, they didn't just, sit around and guess.
Right.
They actually gathered over 21,500 public responses.
Oh, wow.
Which is a pretty significant sample size, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely.
And guess what? 80% of those responses were in favor of simultaneous elections.
Really?
Yeah, and these responses came from all over the place, like Lakshadweep, Andaman, and Nicobar, even Nagaland.
Okay.
The highest number, though, came from Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, and Karnataka.
So it sounds like there's a lot of public support for this idea.
For sure.
But politics, right? It's always complicated.
It always is.
So what about the political parties themselves? Do they all, jump on board the one nation, one election bandwagon?
Well, that's where things get a little more interesting.
Okay.
The committee actually consulted with 47 political parties.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, covering a lot of different ideologies and interests.
Mm-hmm.
And 32 of them were in favor of simultaneous elections.
Okay.
They cited all sorts of reasons, things like optimizing resources, improving governance, maybe even boosting social harmony.
Right.
But it is important to note that 15 parties expressed some reservations about it.
Right.
So, it's clearly not a simple issue.
No, definitely not.
It's complex. It has a lot of different facets to consider.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to unpack there.
So before we get into the actual pros and cons, right, the nitty gritty of it all,
Yeah.
let's just address the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Why is this even back on the table after all these years? Like,
Yeah.
what's driving this renewed interest in this whole one nation, one election thing?
That's a good question. And it's something that I think our listeners should really think about, especially those who are preparing for exams. Right.
It's really important to understand the why behind this whole thing.
Exactly.
Not just the what.
Yeah, it's not enough to just know the facts.
Right.
You got to understand the motivations and what the potential consequences could be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get into that then. What are the main arguments that people are making in favor of one nation, one election? What are the benefits they're highlighting?
I think one of the biggest arguments is that, constantly having elections can actually make it harder to govern effectively.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Imagine, a government that's always in campaign mode.
Right.
They're constantly thinking about the next election instead of focusing on, long-term goals and actually getting stuff done.
So simultaneous elections would give them more time to actually govern.
Exactly. It could create a much more stable environment for them to, actually focus on the job at hand.
Okay, I see your point. But wouldn't this constant campaigning also keep politicians more, accountable to the people?
That's definitely a valid point. And if we had fewer elections, wouldn't that mean less accountability?
That's something the committee actually considered as well.
Okay.
But the people who support this idea argue that, accountability shouldn't just be about how often we have elections.
Right.
It's about transparency.
Yeah.
Effective governance, actually delivering on promises.
Okay, so it's more about the quality of the governance than the quantity of elections.
Exactly. It's about making sure that the government is actually doing its job properly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And let's not forget about the sheer logistical challenge of conducting elections in a country as massive as India.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the manpower, the security, the cost, it's huge.
That's a massive undertaking.
So I'm already picturing, exam questions about this.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how much money could we actually save with one nation, one election?
It's hard to put an exact number on it,
Yeah.
but it's definitely significant.
Yeah.
Fewer elections means we're spending less on personnel, security, transportation, all that stuff.
And all that money could go towards other things.
Right. Things like education, healthcare infrastructure, you name it.
Okay, so the economic argument definitely has some weight.
For sure.
But what about regional politics?
Yeah.
Doesn't one nation, one election kind of risk overshadowing regional issues and maybe even sidelining those smaller regional parties?
That's a really important point to consider.
Yeah.
And it's something that comes up a lot in these discussions.
Mhm.
But, some people actually argue that it could have the opposite effect.
Really?
They say it could actually empower regional parties and even highlight local concerns even more.
Okay, now that's interesting.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, think about it. If national and regional elections are held at the same time,
Yeah.
voters are going to be more likely to focus on the issues that are specific to their state or their local area,
Mm-hmm.
which gives regional parties a chance to really address those concerns, directly.
So it could shift the focus away from those big national issues.
Exactly.
And give those regional voices more of a platform.
Yeah, it could really change the whole dynamic.
So instead of getting caught up in like the national frenzy,
Right.
voters can really zero in on what matters most to their own communities.
Exactly. And that could have a huge impact on regional representation.
And what about the political parties themselves? How would this affect them?
Well, if everyone's focused on just one election cycle,
Yeah.
it could create opportunities for different types of leaders to emerge.
Okay.
We might see a more diverse and representative political landscape.
So it's not just about efficiency and cost savings.
No.
It's about potentially creating a more inclusive and responsive political system.
That's the idea.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
It's about making sure that everyone's voice is heard, and every region is properly represented.
Yeah, but let's be realistic for a second.
Okay.
I mean, no reform is perfect, right? There are always going to be challenges and potential downsides.
Right.
So what are some of the concerns that people have raised about this whole one nation, one election idea?
I think one of the biggest concerns is the possibility of it, leading to some anti-democratic outcomes.
Okay.
Some critics worry that bundling all the elections together could actually give an unfair advantage to those larger national parties.
Right.
And it could end up marginalizing smaller parties and independent candidates. And then, of course, there are the logistical challenges, which
Yeah.
are always going to be a big factor in a country as large and diverse as India.
Absolutely. Trying to synchronize everything on that scale, it just seems like a massive undertaking.
It is.
And there's always the risk that, it could backfire
Yeah.
and actually weaken our democracy instead of strengthening it.
That's a tough question, right? I mean, the committee did acknowledge all these concerns, though.
Yeah.
And they actually proposed phased implementation to, kind of try to minimize those risks.
Interesting.
So their idea is to start by syncing up the Lok Sabha and state assembly elections, and then within 100 days bring the municipalities and panchayats into the mix.
Okay, so kind of like a gradual rollout.
Right, give the system some time to adjust and work out any kinks before going all in.
Makes sense. But wouldn't something this big require like some pretty major legal changes?
Absolutely. You'd need to amend Articles 82A and 324A of the Constitution.
There you go.
This is important stuff for our listeners who are prepping for exams.
Yay.
82A deals with the duration of state assemblies, And 324A empowers the Election Commission to conduct elections.
Okay.
So amending these would basically provide the legal framework for simultaneous elections.
So picture this, right? You're in the exam hall,
Yeah.
and a question pops up. Which constitutional amendments are needed for one nation, one election?
Oh, yeah.
Boom. You know the answer? Articles 82A and 324A.
That's it. Nailed it. And there's another key recommendation that I think is worth mentioning.
Okay.
A single electoral roll and epic card for all 3 tiers of government. Imagine that. One card, one voter, one election.
That would definitely streamline things.
It would.
Less chance for errors.
Yeah,
Makes it easier for people to vote.
absolutely.
Okay, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, we have.
We talked about the history, the rationale, the potential benefits and drawbacks, even the constitutional amendments that would be needed.
Yeah.
So what's next? Like, what happens now with this whole one nation, one election thing?
Well, the fact that the cabinet accepted the committee's recommendations is a big deal.
Right.
It shows that they're serious about this, but it's just the first step, you know?
Yeah.
Those constitutional amendments still need to be debated and passed by Parliament,
Right.
and that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, definitely.
There's going to be a lot of discussion, a lot of negotiation and scrutiny from all sides.
That's democracy in action.
No,
It takes time.
it does.
It's not a quick fix.
No.
But the fact that this is even being considered at the highest levels of government,
Yeah.
I mean, that says something right.
It does. I think it shows that there's a growing recognition that maybe, you know,
Yeah.
India's electoral system could use a little bit of an update.
Right.
You know, maybe it needs to be tweaked a bit to keep up with the demands of, you know, the 21st century.
And for all of you listening, this is your chance to really become informed participants in this debate.
Absolutely.
You know, read that committee's report,
Yeah.
follow the discussions, see what people are saying, analyze the arguments, and form your own opinions.
Yeah.
This is about shaping the future of India's democracy.
It is. You know, really think about it. Would simultaneous elections actually make India's democracy stronger? Or could they create new problems that we haven't even thought of yet? Would they lead to more stability and better governance?
Yeah.
Or would there be, you know, some unintended consequences that we didn't anticipate?
Those are the questions we all need to be asking ourselves.
As citizens, you know, this is our democracy.
And that's why we do these deep dives.
That's right.
You know, we want to give you the knowledge and insights you need, not just to understand these complex issues, but to really engage with them.
To think critically about them.
Yeah, you know, really think about them critically and thoughtfully.
Form your own opinions.
So today, we've really unpacked this whole one nation, one election idea.
We have.
We looked at the history, the reasoning behind it, the potential benefits and the concerns, and we even talked about what the road ahead might look like.
Yeah.
So now it's your turn to think about it.
Right.
Analyze it all and form your own informed opinions.
Remember, you know, well-informed citizenry is the backbone of any strong democracy.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that wraps up today's deep dive. We hope you found it informative, insightful, and maybe even a little thought-provoking.
I hope so.
Don't forget to subscribe and like for more deep dives into topics that matter.
We'll be back with more.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep those brains buzzing.